Imagine landing in the UK expecting grime, chaos, and crumbling streets, only to walk out of the airport and immediately start questioning everything you thought you knew about cleanliness. That moment right there, that split second of disbelief, is where some of the dumbest American reactions to UK cleanliness are born. Because for a surprising number of American tourists, the shock isn't culture, accents, or weather, it's the fact that the UK looks cleaner than they were ever told it would be. And instead of quietly processing that information, some people choose to react in the loudest, most confused, and most unintentionally hilarious ways possible. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. You'll see it happen almost instantly. Someone steps onto a London Underground platform, looks around, and their brain short-circuits. No trash piles, no overpowering smell, no graffiti layered on top of graffiti, just people moving efficiently, trains arriving on time, and floors that don't look like they've survived 3 apocalyptic events. And the reaction? Wait, this is it? Like they were promised something much worse, like the UK broke some unspoken agreement to be messier than America. And that's where the irony kicks in. Because these reactions usually come from people who've grown up stepping over littered sidewalks, avoiding certain public restrooms like they're haunted, and accepting broken infrastructure as a normal part of daily life. Yet here they are, staring at a centuries-old city that somehow manages to look cared for, and instead of admiration, what comes out is disbelief mixed with confusion. Some even sound disappointed, as if cleanliness was supposed to be an American-exclusive feature. One of the most common reactions goes something like this. It's weird how clean it is. Weird. Not impressive. Not refreshing. Weird, as if a country maintaining its public spaces is some kind of suspicious behavior. You can almost hear the gears turning as they try to reconcile the image they had in their head with the reality right in front of them. Because for years, the stereotype painted the UK as grey, damp, outdated, and slightly falling apart. What they weren't prepared for was organized streets, maintained parks, and public transport that doesn't feel like a gamble every time you step on it. Then comes the public transport shock. Americans who barely use trains at home suddenly find themselves riding clean underground systems, sitting on buses without sticky floors, and walking through stations that don't look abandoned. And instead of saying, "Wow, this works," the reaction turns into, "Why is this nicer than ours?" That question hangs in the air uncomfortably, because the answer isn't flattering. It quietly exposes how low expectations have become back home. And that realization hits harder than jet lag. Public toilets deserve their own moment in this conversation, because the reactions there are legendary. Americans enter UK public restrooms cautiously, bracing themselves for disappointment, only to find functioning locks, intact doors, and floors that don't look like a crime scene. The confusion is immediate. Some even laugh nervously, like they've walked into the wrong room. And you can almost hear the internal dialogue. Wait, this is public? Yes, public, for everyone, and somehow still maintained. That realization alone causes a full mental reboot. Street cleanliness is another trigger point. UK streets, especially in city centers and residential neighborhoods, tend to be walkable, swept, and surprisingly free of random trash. Americans notice this instantly, and then comes the awkward comparison. Why don't we have this? Quickly followed by excuses. Well, we have more people. Our cities are bigger. It's probably just this area. Anything to avoid admitting that maybe, just maybe, the system back home isn't doing what it should. What makes these reactions even dumber is how often they're paired with comments about taxes or freedom, as if cleanliness somehow threatens personal liberty. As if having clean streets means you've given something up. Meanwhile, people are casually enjoying parks without dodging debris, riding trains without clenching their teeth, and walking through historic streets that are older than the United States itself, yet somehow better maintained. That part really stings. Because it quietly asks a question no one wants to answer. How does a place this old still look, this put together? Then there's the food hygiene shock. Americans walk into UK supermarkets expecting something outdated, only to find clean aisles, organized shelves, and fresh food that doesn't feel like it's been handled by 10 different people. And again, instead of appreciation, the reaction turns defensive. It's smaller, there's less choice, sure, but it's clean, calm, and functional. And that contrast makes some people uncomfortable. Even the trash system causes confusion. Designated bins, recycling that's actually used, streets that don't rely on luck to stay clean. Americans notice that litter isn't just magically gone, it's managed, and somehow that idea feels foreign, almost suspicious. Because back home, overflowing bins and scattered trash have become so normalized that seeing the opposite feels unnatural. The funniest part of all this is how quickly the narrative flips. At first, there's disbelief, then denial, and finally, reluctant acceptance. You can almost hear the shift when someone says, "Okay, I didn't expect this." That's the moment the stereotype collapses. That's when the dumb reaction quietly turns into self-reflection, even if they'd never admit it out loud. And let's talk about the reactions online, because that's where things really get wild. Americans filming TikToks and YouTube shorts, panning their cameras across clean streets like they've discovered a glitch in the Matrix. "Why is it so clean?" they ask, genuinely baffled, as if cleanliness was supposed to stop at the Atlantic Ocean. The comments fill up instantly. Some agree, some argue, some get defensive. But the point is already proven. The shock exists because expectations were wrong. What makes these reactions especially ironic is how often they come from people who proudly claim America is the greatest country in the world, and yet here they are, stunned by basic maintenance. Not luxury, not extravagance, just cleanliness. Streets without chaos, transport without decay, public spaces that don't feel neglected. That contrast speaks louder than any argument ever could. And no one's saying the UK is perfect. It isn't. No country is. But the reaction itself, that raw disbelief, reveals more about American normalization of dysfunction than it does about British superiority. Because when clean streets feel shocking, the problem isn't the streets, it's what you've been conditioned to accept. By the end of the trip, many of these same Americans quietly adjust. They stop commenting every 5 minutes. They start enjoying the calm. They walk more. They relax. And that might be the biggest plot twist of all. Because once you experience a place where cleanliness isn't treated like a bonus feature, it's hard to go back without noticing what's missing. So the next time you see an American online losing their mind over how clean the UK is, remember, that reaction isn't really about Britain. It's about comparison. It's about expectations colliding with reality. And it's about realizing that maybe, just maybe, what you thought was normal isn't actually normal at all. And here's the real question. If basic cleanliness causes this much shock, what else have people been quietly accepting without realizing it? And just when you think it's over, the reactions get even funnier. Because once Americans start processing the UK's cleanliness, they don't just compare streets or toilets, they start noticing the little details everywhere, like how no one's leaving chewing gum stuck to historic monuments, or how pubs and cafes don't look like they've been hit by a tornado every weekend. And then comes the classic reaction. Do they even live here? Yes, people live here. And somehow, magically, it works. That tiny realization blows minds. Then, there's the public etiquette twist. Americans are used to tipping everywhere, scrambling for a thank you or a smile just to validate effort. In the UK, polite behavior is just normal. Doors held, litter picked up, queues respected. And suddenly, some Americans start questioning their entire concept of public decency. Wait, people actually behave in public without being told? Yes. And again, it's shocking because it challenges everything they've been conditioned to expect. Even the smallest things like street signs not covered in stickers, perfectly functioning traffic lights, or a park without graffiti everywhere, trigger those wide-eyed reactions. People literally point and whisper like they've stumbled into a parallel universe. And the funniest part, the longer they stay, the quieter the disbelief gets. It turns into subtle admiration, maybe even envy. Because after a few days, they start realizing that this level of public care doesn't just happen, it's intentional. It's a system, and they didn't expect to encounter one. By the end, these Americans aren't just noticing cleanliness, they're questioning their own cities back home, and that's where the real comedy lies. Not in what the UK does, but in how utterly unprepared some Americans were to experience it. Clean streets, functioning transport, polite strangers, all basic things that somehow feel revolutionary. And you can almost hear them thinking, maybe, just maybe, our